Okay, well, we will go ahead and get started then. I know that we have a small class today, but we are recording for the people who could not attend. So I want to welcome you to the Organizational Change Management Primer class. This class is meant to be an introduction to the understanding of organizational change management and its benefits. And of course, if you are a certified project manager, you can get 2 PDUs from this class. And those PDUs can either go to the business acumen domain, or it can go to the ways of working. A lot of people are trying to collect those business acumen domain PDUs right now because it's harder to get those. So if you need them for that, then you can use this one for that. Okay, just to confirm, we should be done by noon today. I'm sorry, Tara, did you need something? Oh, I thought I heard somebody say something.
Oh, I'll mute myself. I might have talked to myself.
You're all good. We should be finished by noon today. We are recording again, and I will make that available on the learning management system probably later on today, depending on how long it takes to download to my computer. Please make sure that you are muted on your computer or your phone, however you connected. You can unmute. We have a small class today, so just unmute if you have any questions, or you can put them in the chat. Tara is monitoring the chat for us today, so she'll be able to interrupt me if you don't feel like doing that. But again, I don't mind if you need to interrupt. This class is for you, and I want you to get the most out of it. So please try to stay engaged if at all possible using that chat. You can use emojis and raise your hand and things like that if you want to also. Please keep in mind that we do lose 50 to 80% of what we learn every day. So if you need to take notes to keep this information relevant or to help retain this information, I do have that presentation on the learning management system. It's going to show you that really quickly. Get that pull up here. Am I sharing my screen? Okay, can you see that? Okay, should ask that first. This is the course right here. You can see right here, this is the PDF of the slides. So you are welcome to download this. This is yours to keep. We also have a template, or it's actually an assessment that we are doing today as part of the training. And that is right here also. Again, yours to keep. You can use it in the future in whatever way you need to. When you complete the training evaluation form today, that will release your certificate. So after the training, if you go back and please take that for me, that's how we collect our metrics as project managers. And that will release your certificate that has that code for the PDUs on it. Okay. Any questions over the learning management system? For those of you who do not know me, I am Kelly McDermott. I am the training practice administrator for Health Tech Solutions and Celerity. I am also a certified disciplined agile senior scrum master and a project management professional. It's an awful lot of P's going on there, which puts me in a unique position when it comes to organizational change management. Project managers are essential to the success of any change within an organization. And the practice of organizational change management processes throughout the course of a project are extremely important. That is one of those new, I want to say requirements, but that's not right. One of the new best practices that the new PMBOK, the version 7, has brought in for project managers, that they are in a unique position to at least ensure on their project that organizational change management is happening in that way. That, and I am the mother of 8 wonderful children. So not only have I practiced project management forever, but also change management because, well, we live in a chaotic environment at my house. Before we begin, I would like to learn a little bit more about you. Since this is a virtual class, we're going to use the chat for this. So please just take a few minutes, bring up the chat, give me your name and your organization and what you want to know about organizational change management. If you'll go ahead and do that now, we can start taking attendance this way. Remember that if you are collecting professional development units for this training, we do have to keep a record of that attendance just in case you get audited. And if you do get audited, just let me know and I can send you that attendance list to prove that you did take this training. So if you would just go ahead and in the chat, put your name, your organization, and what you want to know about organizational change management, I will give you a moment to do that. Yeah, we'll definitely touch on that official practice of organizational change management in this class. We're going to talk about how project managers can bring that into their practice, especially just because it is really important. I love seeing those responses in there. I'll give you another minute to finish those up and then we'll move on. Oh, Robert, I don't believe that. Everyone has something fun or interesting. Maybe, are you reading a book at the moment? Or do you have a favorite book? I'm an English major, so that's always my default to go to that. If you guys need to know about mine is Of Mice and Men. I love John Steinbeck, and he has always been my favorite author. So that's always my go-to book. Okay, if you guys are still finishing that up, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and move on because, well, I want to make sure that we could get through all the material today. Just a little bit about us. I did say that I was the training practice administrator for Health Tech Solutions and Celerity. Health Tech Solutions is the side of the house that is the technology and project management consulting firm part. I do come from the health tech side, so I am a practicing project manager. I do work on some health IT projects also, but mostly training at this point. I have moved my way into more of that. I do have an educational background, so it was just natural that I moved into that role. People do come to us. We do have contracts in over 34 states where we help with multiple initiatives. So health IT, business consulting, project management. We do help establish project management offices and organizations, program and policy consulting, lots of different things that we do on the health tech side. Celerity was brought in to help supplement our training program on the health tech side, since we do implement a lot of different policies and products and services on the health tech side. We needed to be able to train our clients on how to use that. And we'll learn more about what that means in an organizational change management process, because projects are undertaken by organizations to bring value. Well, if the people that you're giving that value to never use it or don't know how to use it efficiently, did you really succeed in that project? So that is really what organizational change management is bringing into project management here. So Celerity is a health tech solutions company. We do provide integrated approach to business consulting and training. We can start training programs. We can analyze programs. We can do project management. So we do have a lot of expertise on both sides of the house. Okay, so today what we're going to talk about, we're going to learn some common terms and definitions for organizational change management, because as practitioners, we need to speak and know the common terminology of the practice. We're going to learn what organizational change management is and what some of the challenges are. And then we're going to learn some success factors, because that's important also. Organizational change management is part of the project management principles in the new PMBOK, as I said, so it is important for project managers to know the process and best practices of organizational change management. And we're going to finish with some helpful tools, mostly that assessment that I have on there. Now, do keep in mind, this is one of our free classes, and it is a very short class. I can talk about organizational change management for days. So we really had to condense some information here, but I think this is a great introduction to what organizational change management is. And if you want to go deeper into it, we do offer other classes with organizational change management. So let me know if that is something that you're interested in. Okay, so first we're going to introduce some terminology and their definitions that you're going to hear throughout this course, especially, and with our other organizational change management courses. We have our current state, or you may know it as the as-is state. This is how things are being done right now, business as usual, the processes and tools that make up your current daily work. Future state, or to be state, this is how things will be when we finish this project, or when we finish this change initiative. This is what we vision or envision it to be, it to look like. The future state is unknown. We don't know it until we actually get there. Anything can happen to change what that's going to look like. And a lot of times it's not well understood. It does describe the outcome that the change initiative or the project is working to achieve. Organizational culture generally refers to the shared set of values, principles, assumptions, beliefs, symbols, and behaviors that reflect how work gets designed and executed within an organization or a company. Now, the thing with organizational culture and organizational change management is that culture is one of the hardest things to change in any organization. It is one of the hardest things to change. When we talk about some of the change models, you'll see that having that shift in the culture is one of the last things that we do in organizational change management because we have to build up to it. If you try to tackle the culture change first, it's going to fail every time. You have to have processes that build up to this cultural change. Another thing that I find interesting about organizational culture is that I read an article a couple of years ago over HR processes and their hiring processes and how HR professionals, whether knowingly or unknowingly, hire for the culture that already exists within an organization. So they look for those traits in new hires. And what that does for an organization is that it really creates this issue around innovation and changes within an organization. If everyone thinks the same way and acts the same way, it's really hard to enact any changes in that culture there. So that's another thing that we have to keep in mind when we're talking about organizational change management. Organizational change management is defined as a structured process and set of tools for managing the people side of change, such that business results are achieved on time and on budget. The people side of change. One thing that project management, now in project management, we do have integrated change control, but keep in mind that that is more for processes. That is managing changes in processes and deliverables and products, not in people. Organizational change management brings in that people aspect of change because people experience the change brought on by those processes and products and deliverables. And we have to, I don't like using the word manage when we talk about people, so I'm going to use the word lead because you always need to lead the people. You can manage the processes, but you need to lead the people through that change. And that is really what's going to decide whether this is successful or not. A project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. Project lifecycle is a series of phases that a project passes through from its start to its completion. And resistance is the opposition to altered circumstances or modifications to the status quo or to the current state or the as-is state. We are naturally resistant to change. As human beings, we experience changes all the time that we have no control over. We grow up, we have different experiences, different jobs. All of these things we have no control over. They happen, and we have to deal with them as they occur. So when something happens in our work environment, especially, we naturally try to resist it or try to control it in some way because we feel like we might have some sort of say or some sort of control over that. So that's really how resistance plays into this, into our lives, into our work life. That we know, if we know that about people, we can put steps in place to try to help reduce that anxiety and that resistance to what is going to be changing in that work environment. A sponsor is any senior or mid-level manager who has employees that will be impacted by the change and who must sponsor the change with these employees for the change to be a success. And a stakeholder is anyone who may be affected by or perceive themselves to be affected by a decision, activity, or outcome of a project, program, or portfolio, either positively or negatively. If we're dealing with the people side of change, we have to know who those people are. So identifying stakeholders is a big part of organizational change management, just like it is in project management. Okay. Any questions over any of those terms or terminology? Move on. So let's talk about what organizational change management is. The reality is, if everything was okay, there would be no need to change things. But when a change is needed, we tend to undertake projects to make that change happen. Okay, projects mean change. As a team member, and especially as a project manager, not only do you need to know how to manage that change in processes throughout that project, but you also have to lead the people that are being affected by that change through that process. Change affects people, and that is what we're talking about when we're talking about organizational change management. Yes, there are processes involved, but it's the people side of that change, of those processes, that we're worried about. Project success isn't just about implementation of the product or result of the project. It's also about adoption. It won't help if we deliver this product on time, within budget, and with a satisfied customer if nobody ever uses it, if it's not adopted. That's when that value is realized. And if that value never gets realized, we essentially failed in that project anyway. So OCM, Organizational Change Management, incorporates organizational tools that can be utilized to help individuals make a successful transition, resulting in that adoption and realization of the change. Change from the business current state to that future state, which would be the end of that project, can result in emotional responses from staff. The more seamless that transition is for an organization's people, the more effectively and efficiently the organization will be in achieving the benefits of that desired future state. Essentially, organizational change management is a strategic framework on how to manage that change with the people. Organizational change management is a completely different skill from project management. Yet, project managers are uniquely positioned to make sure that an organization is prepared for changes. We recognize that there is value in organizational change management. At Health Tech and Celerity, we actually invite that in all of our projects. We make sure that there are processes in place to ensure that our project managers or project leads or program leads are also considering the people that are involved in the project, because that creates a more successful project. And some of the statistics are that when organizations realize the true value of organizational change management, projects are 50% more likely to, I said that backwards. When they don't recognize the true value of organizational change management, projects are 50% more likely to fail or be challenged. And that's a big statistic there. We know that if we can deliver this project on time and on budget, but those people are not ready to receive it or use it or realize that value, then the project is a failure. Only 18% of organizations feel that they understand or are good at organizational change management. And that's a very low statistic. We want to make sure that we increase that, because organizations that know the value of organizational change management, that start change departments, that have change leaders within the organization, that promotes change within their project managers, and knowing those emotional intelligence parts of project management, and how to deal with conflict effectively, and active listening and using empathy. All of those things are things that organizations can do, easy things that organizations can do and promote to make sure that their projects are more successful than organizations that are not using organizational change management practices. Figuring out how to drive change that is successful is not a new problem. You can see that this quote is very old. It comes back from, gosh, the 1400s, which is a long time ago. There's nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. And that is very true. But we have to consider that. We have to consider what people think about this or what they feel about this and how we can help them transition through that. A little bit of history about organizational change management. It did originate in the early part of the 1900s. Kurt Lewin, among others, contributed a great deal to the ideas that eventually became known as change management. Today, most change models are founded on group dynamics and psychology. There are many different change models or frameworks, but most are aimed at engaging employees, motivating them to change, explaining the need for the change, providing the skills and tools to change, pushing organizational change forward one step at a time, and reinforcing the change once a project is complete. Notice the verbs here and how it deals with how people feel about what is going on. Engaging, motivating, explaining, providing, pushing, reinforcing. All of this deals with the people that are dealing with that change. Organizational change management is needed for success with business improvement and transformational programs. It has been said that change is the only constant. Yet many businesses or many business improvement and transformation programs fail to deliver their expected business results or value. Why? Well, the root cause of the failure in up to 70% of those programs is due to the inherent lack of ability of people to manage the impact of changes on their project and organization. Organizations can drive better performance and amp up business results through effective organizational change management. Change management is critical to driving successful adoption of a company's vision. And the most effective change teams are comprised of both clients and employees. So we are really ensuring that all stakeholders are involved here, that all stakeholders have a part in organizational change management. Leading change is an important part of a leader's job. This includes project managers. Visible, committed leaders are vital to success. There are a lot of organizations that won't even use the term project manager anymore. They've changed it to project lead or project leader because, again, we can manage processes, but we should never, ever try to manage people. We need to lead people. And how do we lead people? We lead people through example, through being visible to others, to showing them how to do it, to teaching them, to coaching, to mentor them. We have to help them through it. We lead them through it. We can't just direct and manage and command and hope that it happens. It doesn't work that way when you're dealing with people. Organizational change management helps mitigate people-related risks, which involves vision, alignment, and inspiration. It helps leadership models, or it helps leadership to model desired behavioral changes. Again, we're leading by example. It helps balance control with letting go. And it helps recognize the need for organizational interdependence and collaboration. Now, organizational change management in a predictive traditional project management environment is still important, but it's even more important if you work in an adaptive environment where we have agile. Agile concepts bring in this concept of dealing with the people, that we need to make sure that we are leading the team, the client, the end users, the organization itself, ourselves, through the changes that this project is bringing about. And because organizational change management is not fully understood, remember only 18% of organizations feel that they fully understand organizational change management, And because it deals with people and emotions, which we know are hard things to deal with anyway, there are a lot of challenges around organizational change management. Some of the most common challenges with organizational change management are resistance from the people who need to change, navigating the political landscape when dealing with change, addressing team dysfunctions, difficult conversations, coaching, feedback to senior leaders, dealing with ambiguity, uncertainty, inability to forecast the future, and changing mindsets, attitudes, culture, and complexity, which are more important than resource constraints, but harder to manage in that way. So let's talk about a few of these. Resistance from the people who need to change. Does anyone like it if you show up to work one day and your boss comes in and says, oh, we're doing it this way now? When was I supposed to know this? Like, why wasn't I consulted on this? I have a really efficient way of doing this, and now I'm going to have to change. I don't know if I like that. That's going to take more time and effort on my part. So making sure that that communication is strong is a good way to help reduce resistance. Some other things here, addressing team dysfunctions. I do recommend the 5 dysfunctions or the 5 team dysfunctions, whatever the name of that book is. But it does list out the 5 most common dysfunctions of a team and how we can overcome those to create a high performing team like we're supposed to be trying to do anyway. And then changing those mindsets, again, remember that changing a culture is a lot harder to do. And if you don't take the steps to build up to that, it's going to fail every time. Why is it difficult? Well, getting the people part right is one of the most important factors affecting successful change. Change transformation is a continuous process. I can't just tell this department that their process is going to change and then 6 months later change the process without ever talking to them about it again. I have to make sure that it's being communicated continuously with them. Organizations must provide a business model that encourages and enables continuous change. Organizations tend to focus on the implementation of systems and processes, but not the overall impact that those are going to have. A lot of organizations do not see the long-term benefits in investing in organizational change management, and we're hoping that this will do a little bit of changing that, at least for the organizations that you're involved in. And in the end, it is all about changing people's mindsets, and when it comes to change, even though we deal with it on a daily basis, we tend to resist it if it's something that we feel like we might have control over. Change is a journey and occurs over a period of time and often takes longer than expected. We can't just expect to change a process for a department and then stop and never go back to that and make sure that, hey, you are able to do this, and hey, it is efficient, or hey, have you developed a workaround for this? It has to be a continuous journey through that change. And you will notice in every single change model, it ends with a reinforcement of the change. You can't just implement it and then never talk about it again. You have to make sure that there's some reinforcement activities or rewards and recognition system or some sort of process in place to ensure that the change had the effect that we needed it to have. People are comfortable with what they know. Forced initiatives make them question things, their jobs, their roles, their tasks, their team, and skills. People change for their own personal reasons. Some to follow orders, some because they trust friends, some because they're excited to learn new things. I'm always really excited when something new is happening and I get to learn something new about it. But there are some people that aren't like that. They don't like that disrupts their environment. And some people change for the rewards that are involved with it. And we could concentrate on challenges and difficulties of organizational change management all day long, but as a good, positive thinking, proactive project manager, We want to make sure that we have some positive ways, some success factors to look at for organizational change management. So we're going to take a look at some of those. Again, remember, this is a high-level overview, and we go more in depth on these and other change models and stuff in our other organizational change management classes. So we're going to look at 5 success factors here, which are communication, which I've mentioned several times already, sponsorship, stakeholder management, readiness, and training. Again, there are other success factors. These are just the ones that we're going to concentrate on today. So communication, of course, communication is important in all areas of an organization, project management, in your daily life, in your personal life, but also in organizational change management. As a change leader or a project leader, you need to have a communication strategy and plan. And this could be part of your overall project management plan. You can include organizational change management communications in your regular communication management plan as a project manager. Or this can be a whole separate initiative here. If you are lucky enough to have a change leader or have a change department in your organization, then absolutely let them help you develop this and help keep track of it, because it takes a little bit off of your plate there. But if not, do what's best for you. Is it best to have a separate plan? Fine, do that. If it's not, include it in with your communication management plan. We have a lot of clients recently that have been very impressed that, hey, that is just something that we go ahead and include in all of our communication management plans, because it is important for every project. This should be documented and accessible. And why is it documented and accessible? Well, if I win the lottery tomorrow and don't show up to work, then I need someone on my team to be able to pick that up and run with it. I used to say that if I get hit by a bus tomorrow and don't show up, and somebody pointed out that that isn't very positive thinking of me. So now it's if I win the lottery. You need to make sure that you're not the only person that knows this with your project, because if something was to happen and somebody else needed to take that over, you want your baby, your project to succeed. And so the information needs to be there and accessible for the people who need it. You need to establish audience groups, which goes back to knowing your stakeholders, as each group will need to be communicated with differently. Which also brings us to the next point with communications. Your messaging should be tailored to each of those stakeholder groups. You also need to use multiple delivery channels. You can't just send out a series of emails and expect people to continue to read them after a while. You must tailor that delivery method to your audience. And you must be visible. You cannot just announce the change in a big meeting and then never mention it again. You have to make sure that you're constantly talking about that vision for the change, and you must lead by example. Many studies have shown that having a great sponsor for your change can make all the difference between success and failure. A great sponsor builds commitment within the organization for the change. They need to be the key decision maker with the change initiative, and a visible one at that. You should hold regular sponsor meetings to assist the sponsor and ensure continued commitment. Your sponsor should establish directives and policies to meet change requirements, and should be a champion for the change effort. Change initiatives are often driven by one function in the organization, but success of that depends on adoption from other areas within the organization. So success change initiatives are sponsored by active, visible, cross-functional leaders. Now, we have this question a lot in project management also, because strong sponsors, visible sponsors, active sponsors are important in project management also. What do you do if you don't have an active, visible sponsor? Well, then it falls on you to help create that sponsor and the image that you need them to be. And if that means that I have to craft an email and send it to the sponsor and say, hey, would you send this out to the team because it means more coming from you than it does me, then that's what I'll do. If that means that I need to schedule 5 minutes for them to come into a team meeting at the beginning to talk about how we're doing, or to give them, names of the people on the team who have done a really good job lately, whatever that means, to help them stay actively and visibly engaged with the change is what you would need to do as a project leader or manager. Stakeholder management is really important since it must deal with the people side of change. Now, I don't like that word management when we're talking about stakeholders. This is just one of those processes in organizational change management that I would like to change to stakeholder engagement or stakeholder leadership, but it is management here. You want to conduct a stakeholder impact analysis. And again, you're probably already doing this for your project already. So just include these factors in your project processes already. Actively engage your partners and commit to a partnership. Understand the reason, need, and benefits of the change, because if you don't understand them, then you can't communicate that out to other people. And you need to address any concerns of stakeholders in a timely manner. This includes resistance. If you've analyzed a stakeholder group that's resistant to your project and to the product or to the change that it's bringing about, then you need to address that in a timely manner. You can't just let it sit there, because if it does, it gets worse. You must assess your organization's readiness before implementing a change. Now, it says organization's readiness here, but I think it's also important to assess your readiness for change, as well as your team's readiness for change, because that's going to be important also. Just like in project management, where I recommend that, hey, you do a personality assessment with your team members, because it's important to know everyone's communication styles and how everyone interacts with each other. It's also important to do a change readiness assessment with them and yourself, to see how ready you are for that, or to see if there are some weak areas that you might be able to work on to help create a more successful project here. This means that you're going to be looking at people, culture, processes, and strategic alignment. You also need to establish a change team, a change leader, change agents, change recipients, and change sponsors. And that could be just people that are already on your project team. Or again, if you're in an organization fortunate enough to have a change department, then you might have a change leader assigned to your project, which would be awesome. And it is a must to celebrate any and all successes and early wins to keep the movement going forward. This goes back to that motivation. We know that if we recognize people regularly, if we celebrate small wins or short-term wins or early wins, however you want to put that, that it motivates people to keep going with this. And we need them to be motivated to keep moving through this. And that fifth success element that we were going to touch on is training. To ensure the success of the change, you might have to provide training before, during, and after the change. You need to establish a comprehensive training plan. Again, this could be part of your project. You need to train your leaders and your change team. You need to perform a training needs assessment, identify roles and skill building requirements, develop a transition plan, and reinforce and encourage learning throughout the organization. This is part of that reinforcement, that last step of organizational change management, that we're not just going to assume that the department knows how to use the new process or the improved process. We're not just going to assume that they're going to continue to know how to use that process. We're going to have things in place before the change happens, during the change, and after the change to reinforce that knowledge sharing and that knowledge transfer of that change. Any questions so far? Okay. Again, if you don't want to interrupt me, you can put it in the chat. I do tend to talk fast sometimes, but I don't mind being interrupted if you want to do that also. Okay, so now we're going to look at how we can use those success factors within some different change models. There are many, many different change models out there that describe the activities that are necessary for organizational change management. It's your job to use the best one for your change. Just like everything else that we do in project management, this is tailored to our unique project environment, organization. So you need to use the one that you're most comfortable with and that your team can get on board with, and that will make sense for this project. Excuse me. Managing changes in organizations, a practice guide. If you are a member of PMI, Project Management Institute, you actually have this guide available in your standards and publications on your account in PMI. It's the electronic guide. So this is really their process around managing changes, the people side of change in project management land. This framework has 5 associated elements that are interconnected through a series of feedback loops. You formulate the change, and then you get feedback from that. You plan the change, and that involves the identification of any activities that are needed to help prepare the stakeholders for that change, and then you get feedback. You implement the change, and this is an iterative element that focuses on demonstrating the future state capabilities of that change, and then we get feedback. You're going to manage the transition. This considers how to address the needs related to that change that may come up after that change has been implemented. And then we're going to get feedback. And then we're going to sustain or reinforce the change. And this seeks to ensure that that future state eventually becomes the current state, the as-is state. We want that future state to be the new normal. So that's a good one. ADKAR is a really good one to use for individuals, to help individuals transition through a change. You can use it at a macro level, at an organization level, or at a group level, but it usually works better on an individual level. And we go more into depth on ADKAR. We actually talk a lot about that in our Organizational Change Management Foundations class. We actually get you the book on that, and we talk through that. But the ADKAR model was developed by Jeff Hyatt. It focuses on 5 sequential steps that individuals undergo when adapting to change. Step 1 is awareness, and this identifies why the change is necessary. By creating awareness, you define the problem and create a common understanding of the change that is needed. Step 2 is desire, communicating why the change is necessary to fuel a desire from those individuals or stakeholders to want to be part of it and support that change. Understanding creates desire to fix the problem and helps to establish ownership. So see how we have to have this awareness and understanding before we can have the desire for the change. We have to have desire before we can have knowledge, and so on. Okay, step 3 is knowledge. Stakeholders need to understand how to change. This includes understanding new processes and systems, new roles and responsibilities, and new knowledge. This can be gained through training, mentoring, coaching, any type of knowledge transfer activities. Step 4 is ability. Knowledge is supported with the hands-on practice and access to expertise and help. Stakeholders must have help in achieving the change if it is needed. And step 5 is reinforcement. This supports the sustainment of the change. This can include rewards, feedback, recognition, measurement of the metrics to make sure that it had the effect that we wanted it to have. Any of those. Again, we have to make sure that we have these other things to build up to that reinforcement. Now, individuals can also have different levels of awareness, different levels of desire, different levels of knowledge and ability and reinforcement. So we would assess that for those individuals also, so that we can see where we need to go back to. It might be that they have a great awareness and a great desire, and they actually have a great ability to succeed with this change, but maybe their knowledge is not as great. So we would want to go back and make sure that they get the knowledge transfer that they need in order to help with that ability and then lead into the reinforcement. Okay, and Leading Change by John Kotter introduced 8 steps for transforming organizations using a top-down approach. where the need for an approach to change originates at the top level and then is promoted throughout the levels of the organization. We had a book study over leading change. I do recommend this if you are thinking anything about going further into organizational change management. Leading Change by John Kotter is one of those books that I would recommend. He did have other books that were written on change management, but this is the best one that I've found that actually gives you the steps to work through that. Now, he does it at a very macro level, at that organization level, but you can also apply it to the project level. And we actually have our organizational managing transitions class goes through how you can apply these 8 steps to the project level also. So step 1 is create urgency. This is where you're identifying potential threats and opportunities that drive that need for change. Step 2 is form a powerful coalition. So you're going to identify the change team. Again, doesn't necessarily have to be within your team. It may be some other people in the organization that can help promote that change. You need to keep in mind that change leaders should be influential to the people that are going to be involved in that change. So if I bring in the CEO as a part of my coalition, but he doesn't relate to any of the people that are going to be experiencing that change, that wouldn't work for me. That wouldn't be a good strategy to use there. So I need to make sure that these people have some influence over the stakeholders who are going to need to change. Step 3 is create a vision for the change. So identify the values that are central to the change and create a vision statement, which we know is really important for any change. Then you're going to identify a strategy to realize that vision. Step 4 is communicate the vision, which again must be done continuously and throughout. Step 5, remove obstacles. Obviously, in a perfect world, everything would go, well, perfectly, right? But this is reality, and there are obstacles, especially when it comes to change. So you must address all those obstacles in order for the change to be successful. And remember that we're doing it in a timely manner. It doesn't help for us to discover that this stakeholder group is being blocked by this specific thing and then not tackling it for a couple of months. That's just not going to help. That's going to make it worse. Step 7 is build on the change once those short-term wins. Sorry. Step 6 is create short-term wins. Again, that motivation, showing our progress through something, motivating people to support the change and motivating the team to continue to work on the change. Step 7 is build on that change. Once the short-term wins are complete, then the organization should set goals to continue improvement on that. And step 8 is that reinforcement, anchoring the change in the corporate culture, which again is one of the last things that we do because we've built up to it. We're going to ensure the change becomes ingrained into the culture by continuing to communicate the vision, tell success stories, recognize people who embody and empower that change, and continue to support that change. Again, go way more into depth on this in our Managing Change and Transitions class. Let me go back for just a second because I like to talk about this concept of creating urgency. There are a lot of times where we get questions over, well, what does that mean exactly? And there's a fine line between creating urgency and crying wolf. Like, we never want to say something that's not factual or that could be a lie of some sort. I'm not going to say, hey, we need to do this because of this made up reason that I have. It needs to be based on some factual evidence. So I'm not going to make up anything to create that urgency. So I don't like that word create that they use there. It's more take what is already there and show people why it's important. So a good example of that was before the pandemic, we were using Zoom a lot. Well, we had this shift in the culture that wanted to start using Teams more and more, Microsoft Teams. So I was trying to get leadership to get me to let me get a training together over Microsoft Teams so that people could learn how to use it efficiently. Well, then the pandemic happened. They weren't really on board with that because I didn't do a good job of creating the urgency around that. The pandemic happened, and then we were shuffling because most of our clients use Microsoft Teams and not Zoom, and our employees were not being efficient with it. So instead of me creating that urgency and getting that out there before something happened that required us to use it, then we had an issue where I had to get something together quickly. I would have had more time to work on it if I would have gone through the steps correctly here. This is the Virginia Satir, I think is how you say that, change model. And this is really one of those individual models of helping individuals transition through a change. And it really takes on the elements of grief, like those stages of grief that you go through. Because when people experience a change, there's some emotional response to it. So I like to look at this as think about if you have a team, this team has been working together for the last 2 years and the project is coming to an end. Like there's going to be an emotional response there. So this shows managers or leaders how they can help people transition through that change. So this model helps project teams understand what they are feeling and enables them to move through the change more efficiently by breaking how people experience and cope with change into the different stages. So the initial stage is that late status quo, when everything feels familiar, business as usual or as is current state. And for some stakeholders, this is good because they know what to expect. They're very process oriented and they are very regulated on that. So they're feeling good. Though some others could be bored with that, right? Some people love a chaotic environment and love to do multiple things at the same time. So you need to know your people in order to know how they're feeling with that late status quo. When something happens to shift the status quo, you enter the foreign element stage. So something has been introduced, some sort of change or shift in the environment. And this may include initiating a project that includes changing the way people are performing their work. There is often a period of resistance and reduction in performance after this change is introduced, and stakeholders may ignore the change or dismiss its relevance. Then you order the chaos stage, which occurs when stakeholders enter unfamiliar territory. They're no longer comfortable with the status quo because something has been introduced to change that. Performance may drop to the lowest level during the chaos stage. Feelings, actions, and behaviors are unpredictable. Some stakeholders may feel anxious, others may shut down, and some may feel excited. Chaos can make stakeholders get creative as they try to find new ways of dealing with the situation. They can try various ideas and behaviors to see which of these has a positive outcome. And then, of course, you have some of those people that are actually looking for that negative outcome, so you have to watch that. In the transforming idea stage, stakeholders find the idea that helps them make sense of the situation, of this new normal that we are dealing with. They begin to see how they can find a way out of the chaos and cope with the new reality. Work performance begins to increase here. In the practice and integration stage, the stakeholders try to implement their new ideas or behaviors. There may be some setbacks and a period of trial and error, but eventually they learn what works and what doesn't. This leads to improved performance, and sometimes this performance is even higher than when the foreign element was first introduced, which I think is really interesting. And then you reach the new status quo stage. So you've gotten through that transition, and this is the new normal here. And then the process would start over again. When we want to change something with the new status quo, we're going to start back with the late status quo and work our way through those processes again. Most organizations establish their own change models, and that's just fine. If it works for them and if it works for their organization, then that's what we recommend that you do, which is why I said at the beginning, find the model that works for you. And if a model doesn't work, then take varieties of different models and get to something that works for you and your organization and your project. This is just a good example of one that came from a manufacturing organization. When leaders in the company wanted to implement a change, then this is the process that they were required to follow for that change. They established a sense of urgency, which means that they inspire action, develop real relevant objectives, and take ownership for those outcomes. They create a guiding coalition, so they find the right people with the right skills at the right level and get a commitment from them to help with that change. They develop a vision and strategy, which should be business-led and includes a simple creative vision and strategy, and also an emotional connection in some way. So the thing with organizational change management and dealing with emotions, if you can make an emotional connection between the change and the people, then that tends to have a bigger impact on some people. So making sure that you can make that connection. So talking about, I have a class going on right now, an agile class, and I have one group that has a project of initiating a virtual template for teachers to use that will help them to quickly get all of their stuff in a virtual environment so that they can teach children if something happens and we have to go remote again for that. That was something that teachers struggled with. When everyone went remote, they had to take everything that they were preparing to do in the classroom and figure out how to do it in a virtual environment. So this team is trying to get together some virtual software to help teachers with that. So making that emotional connection that look, the teachers, the leaders of our children, the people that are forming our children struggled for months through this, trying to make sure that they were taking care of the students in a virtual environment. And we can do this, we can change this to help them with that, to make this process easier on them, for our children, for them, so that way they can keep that relationship going. So finding that emotional connection is really powerful if you can do that. And then they need to communicate the change vision, involve as many people as possible, keep communication simple and appealing, and respond to people's needs. Inclusive decision-making, remove obstacles, use the voice of key stakeholders, and encourage constructive feedback. There's also, did we have another? No, we didn't have another. There's also another step on here of generate short-term wins. So making sure that we are talking through those short-term wins and recognizing people that are doing good or that have evolved with this process. And then, of course, that reinforcement of that change. Okay, and as I stated at the beginning, the Project Management Institute, PMI, lists the support of organizational change management in the business environment domain as an enabler in the new PMBOK and in the new exam content outline. So if you're studying for that PMP exam, this is definitely something that you need to know also. But as a practicing project manager, you need to know that you need to start building in those organizational change management processes to your project processes, because I guess what PMI has found is that a lot of organizations don't have that change department, don't have change leaders within the organization. So naturally, the project managers have to become that if it's not available in the organization. The PMBOK also discusses how to enable change to achieve the future state of the project. And these are best practices of project management and is expected from certified project managers. Since projects and project management take place in an environment that is broader than the project itself, and an organization's culture, style, and structure influence how those projects are performed, we need to ensure that organizational change management is understood and that project work is being carried out in alignment with the organization's goals for establishing that cultural change or just the change in general for the organization. Organizations are defined as companies or governmental departments that are in place to accomplish a purpose, such as providing healthcare to patients. Every organization develops a unique culture and style that represents its cultural norm and affects how projects are performed. For example, if your organization traditionally works 8 to 5 every single day, that establishes that culture, that routine of I know when work is occurring, as opposed to an organization that has flex hours, where people are working various schedules throughout the work week or even from week to week. So that directly affects how a project manager is going to manage the resources and the schedules for the project and for the organization change that's happening. Culture is shaped by people's common experiences, such as shared visions, missions, values, beliefs, and expectations. In that article that I mentioned earlier about HR being interviewed for their hiring practices and how they hire for the culture, it highlighted this one organization where the CEO was, his height was 5'9", and he was very self-conscious over his height. And they found that no one in the organization was over 5'9". And I thought that was a very interesting aspect there, right? That HR claims, at least in their interviews, that they didn't realize that that's what they were doing, but they wouldn't hire a tall person because that would change the culture. That would change something in the culture and the way that the CEO managed the organization. So that plays a role in everything that we do. And then you see there's some other things here as far as what culture and styles of an organization and how that affects change management within that organization. PMI defines the organizational change management best practices within project management as building a compelling case for the change, so creating that vision, getting buy-in and commitment of key stakeholders, so creating the change coalition or the people on your team that are going to be change leaders or champions, communicating the change vision, and enabling other stakeholders to engage, which is really important. We know in project management that we're not just dealing with the team and our client, that we're dealing with the team, our client, end users, sponsors, funding organizations. A lot of people are involved in our project, whether directly or indirectly. And we have to make sure that they are all engaging with the change in the way that will reduce resistance and help champion that change to a successful end. You must also ensure changes are properly aligned with your project objectives and updates are made to relevant project artifacts to reflect any changes. Again, we go more into depth in this process, specifically from PMI in our Organizational Change Management Foundations class. I wanted to give you a good visual of what it looks like to add in organizational change management processes into your project life cycle. What does that look like? Of course, we're going to do what we need to do for the project management processes and how they fit in. But this is what we can do to align organizational change management with our projects. So you can see here, this project is broken into 4 different phases: plan and analyze, design, build and test, and deploy and transition. So other than the project management processes that we are doing here, here's some other things that we can do to bring in that organizational change management. So inform stakeholders of the change. And this could be at the same time that we are informing them of the project vision. So having that vision and communicating it out, make it part of your project vision, what this change has to do, what change is being brought about and why it's important. Communicate the project timeline, intended audience, and any impacted systems or processes. Inform stakeholders about where they can obtain more information if they have questions. Explain that change vision and explain benefits of the change. So all these things can be worked in to our project processes in the plan and analyze phase there. In the design phase, inform stakeholders how they will work with the new changes, communicate what the system or process changes will be, inform stakeholders of any training that can help them transition through that change, explain the impact to their role, help them understand the need for the change, and use change control processes to communicate key change measures. So very easy ways that we can add that in. Build and test. We're going to inform stakeholders about upcoming implementations, communicate all rollout activities and transition activities, inform stakeholders of the training timeline and enrollment process, and demonstrate changes to systems or processes. Explain how it will be implemented and how they will use it to perform their jobs. All good communication ways of getting that information out there. And then in deploy and transition, we're going to inform stakeholders of key milestones, communicate issues and resolutions, inform stakeholders of ongoing support processes, and participate in support activities and follow-up. So there's our reinforcement of that change. And now a lot of times as a project manager, at this point, we're done with the project, right? And how can we make sure that that reinforcement is going to continue? Because when we're done with a project, we're usually going on to another project. And it's really hard to go back to the other project and say, hey, is this still occurring the way that it needs to occur? This is where you can bring in that sponsor, where you can give them the tools or the processes to put in place to ensure that the change is still being reinforced, or that transition over, if it's transitioning to a different departments or to maintenance and operation, having that part of your transition plan, that in 2 months you need to measure this and ensure that it is still being effective in this way. And if it's not, here's some steps that you can take, or you need to make sure that you are keeping an eye on this, or you need to be collecting feedback from the people who are using this new process to ensure that they are able to use it in the correct way. You need to see who is creating workarounds for it, because gosh, it might be more efficient and we might need to make some new changes to this process also. So designing ways in that transition plan to help whoever is taking over that, whatever environment that change is going into, to ensure that you're reinforcing that change after you've left, or not left, but after your project is done. Okay, this is what the PMBOK version 7 has to say about organizational change management and what the project manager's responsibilities are for their projects. To enable change to achieve the envisioned future state, you need to prepare those impacted for the adoption and sustainment of new and different behaviors and processes required for the transition from the current state to the intended future state that is created by your project outcomes. This is different from project change control, which is the process of identifying, analyzing, and approving or rejecting modifications to processes, documents, deliverables, and baselines associated with your project. To do this, you should develop a structured approach to change, as this helps individuals, groups, and the organization transition from the current state to the future desired state. You should look for change that can originate from internal influences, such as the need for new products or processes, or from external sources, such as a worldwide pandemic. You should plan for the challenge of enabling change, as not all stakeholders are going to embrace that. You're going to have some resistance. That's just natural. You should plan for, or you should know that attempting too much change in a short time can lead to change fatigue and that resistance. And you should plan and implement stakeholder engagement and motivational approaches to assist with the change adoption. Any type of change involves some level of adaptability by the stakeholders experiencing that change, as well as maybe the systems the stakeholders interact with. Keep in mind that when we say the word systems here, we're not talking necessarily about a production system or a software system. We're talking about the system that makes up the organization. So those processes, those inputs, those outputs of everything that the organization does. Projects fit within the overall system of an organization. And as a project manager, you should know where your project fits with other projects and with other operations and with other strategic goals within the organization, and how, if your project does something, how it might change other parts of the system, other parts of the organization that are within that. We learn in lean manufacturing or in lean processes that if you have a lot of turnover, if you have a disruptive environment, that it's usually the system that is bad, not the people in the system. And we also know that a bad system beats a good person every time. That is the fastest way to lose good people within your organization, is having a bad system in place. So looking at the value stream of your organization, looking at how projects are undertaken, looking at how people are assigned to projects. All of these things are parts of that system that should be looked at if that's happening within an organization. Enabling stakeholder change is part of facilitating the project and therefore change management. Enabling organizational change can be challenging, especially when the stakeholders in that organization are inherently resistant to that change. You also need to look for that risk averse. If they are highly risk averse, then that's going to make it a lot harder to introduce any changes within that environment. And if they display a conservative culture, that's going to make it a little bit harder to implement changes within that environment. Effective change management uses a motivational strategy that encourages engagement and interaction or interactive communication to create an environment in which that adoption can occur. And when we say interactive communications, remember, interactive communication is a two-way type of communication. You have a sender and a receiver, you have a feedback loop, and that communication continues between multiple people. Also, active listening is a big part of interactive communication. And active listening is exactly what it says. You're actively participating in the listening of that sender, of whoever's sending that information. And that can look like a variety of things. It can be leaning forward, it could be maintaining eye contact, it could be nodding your head that you understand, it could be paraphrasing, what I hear you say is this, or it can be questioning. I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that. Can you restate that in a way that I might understand? So all of these things are ways of interactive communication and active listening. You need to adapt the speed of change to the organization's change appetite. People go through a lot of changes all the time, and we need to keep that in mind. If this organization has tried this type of change and failed in the past, then that's something that's going to affect the way that this change is now interpreted this time. Things need to change. Things are going to have to be implemented differently in order to get people on board with this. And we want to obviously include those activities to reinforce the change after its implementation. Okay. Any questions over anything so far? You guys are really quiet. Either I'm doing a really good job or I've put you to sleep. Okay, finally, we're going to talk about some organizational change management tools, because I want to make sure, even though this is a free class, I want to make sure that you leave here with something that you can use today or tomorrow, within your, no, not tomorrow because it's the weekend, but that you can use at some point within your work environment. Again, some of these tools we're going to go over at a high level, and then we're going to go more in depth over that change readiness assessment. There are a lot of tools out there that can help you through the organizational change process. I have a few listed here on the slide. Now, if you take our organizational change, managing change and transition, I always get that name wrong. If you take our class, we do offer all of these templates that are starred here, all these tools that we provide with that class. So that's our entire change management toolkit that we have. But you can probably Google most of these things and find some online. So we offer a change readiness assessment, a defining change template, how you can do that, giving you the steps to do that, your change strategy or change plan, roles in the change process. So who is doing what and what are their responsibilities? And you can use a RACI chart for that within your project also. A sponsor assessment. Remember, going back to making sure that your sponsor is an active participant in the process, in the change, in the project. This gives you a good assessment of how to work with them on that and what maybe they might need help with in the future. Leadership, sponsor, cultural action plans are good. Your communication strategy or plan, stakeholder analysis, training strategy or plan, benefits realization, resistance management plan, risk assessment, and learning needs assessment are all good tools to use with organizational change management. And we are going to concentrate on the change readiness assessment. The change readiness assessment can be used at an individual employee level. Like I said before, I do recommend that you do this yourself and with your team so that you can assess the capacity that individuals have for the change. And we also have one for the organization level. So seeing if they're change resistant or change fatigue, have we experienced too much change? It's going to be harder for us to implement here. When the assessment is analyzed, you can determine risks and potential obstacles and develop strategies to address those areas of need. Just like with the personality assessment, it's important to know this information about ourselves, about our team, and even our key stakeholders. So what I'm going to have you guys do is think of a change initiative within your organization, or maybe even a personal change. Maybe think back to when the pandemic first happened and maybe we had to scramble to go remote, or we had to work around kids coming home and staying home, whatever that is. Think through that. And then I want you to pull up that assessment. I'll pull it up here also if you can't access it or don't have it yet. But go ahead and download that from the learning management system and take the assessment based on your role within your organization or within that change. Okay, you want to circle the number beside each statement that reflects how accurately that statement describes you. 1 is not like me at all, and 6 is exactly like me. Then you're going to total up those scores. Okay, so let me bring this up so I can show you. I have it up here, so if you just need to write it down, you can do that. So number 6, whatever I score there is what I'm going to put here, and that's how you do the score. Notice that some of these categories, you're taking the total and you're subtracting them from a number, and we'll get to that when you're done. But go ahead and take that assessment and then total up your scores here. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to do that. Whenever you are done, please either raise your hand on the emoji or just come off mute and let me know. Robert, these are in the learning management system, so you can download it right now. Let me get back to that. It's right here. So you can just hit download there. And if I need to send it to you afterwards, I can do that also if you're having trouble accessing it. I'm gonna give you about 10 minutes to work on that, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the results. And I'm here, and Tara's here, so you can put anything in the chat if you have a question or just ask me. You came off mute, but I didn't hear your response. If you want to put it in the chat, that would work. No problem. Awesome. Okay, so let's go over this. So there's another one. I hope y'all saw that one there on your sheet. But this is the really important part of this assessment, is learning what those traits mean. So it's not necessarily what you scored the highest in, like with a personality assessment. It's where you scored in each of these areas, in each of these 7 traits of change readiness. So for instance, resourcefulness. Resourceful people are effective at taking the most of any situation and utilizing whatever resources are available to develop plans and contingencies. They see more than one way to achieve a goal and can look in less obvious places to find help. They have a real talent for creating new ways to solve old problems. Excuse me. People with low resourcefulness tend to get stuck or tend to be stuck when they encounter obstacles. They dig their heels in and they revert to the old way of doing things. Now, the average score for these areas, you want to score, I think I had it on here somewhere, but it's anywhere from 20 to 25. If you're scoring anywhere between 20 and 25 on all of these, then you're really well-rounded in change readiness. But people with very high scores, so over 26 in this, might overlook obvious solutions and create more work than is necessary. So these types of people, if you score really high here and you're on my team, then I'm going to try to take steps to work with you to ensure that you are not doing the hardest route possible, right? And this is me. I have to say, this is me. And Dania and Tara know this about me, that I always go for the hardest way to do something first. And I don't know why that is, but I do. That is just me. That sometimes people just have to say, all you have to do is push that one button instead of going all around and pushing several hundred buttons before you get to that one button, right? And knowing this about myself, then I could take a step back and try to mitigate that in some way. But you guys have this document on the learning management system. Please read about yourself, read about what strategies you could put in place to help if you are really high score on some or really low score on some. So if you scored really low in resourcefulness, what can I do as your project leader to help you develop more resourcefulness there? And we have a whole training over this change readiness and how to help people with these different traits and how to either help them gain more in it or reduce it some, because sometimes you have to reduce it, right? So I think this is a really valuable type of assessment. And again, yours to take and do what you need to with that. Any questions over this assessment? Really good information to have there, okay? Okay, so what have we done today? We've learned some common terms and definitions, what organizational change management is and what some of those challenges of it are. We discussed some success factors and different change models, what PMI and the new PMBOK says about organizational change management. And hopefully you'll be able to take that tool and use that in your environment and be able to at least assess where you are with change readiness and put strategies in place for that. I want to leave you with a list of professional organizations that you might be interested in. And again, you have this on the learning management system. You can print off the slide set there so that you have it. Also, there's some additional reading. See some familiar names here, Jeff Hyatt and then John Cotter here. Again, I do highly recommend Leading Change. There's the book title that I was looking for, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So you can see all those here. We also have some links to some other articles that might be helpful for you here. One thing that I do want to remind you, and I'm not sure that this one is up to date, so don't worry about this slide right here, but I do want to remind you to please check out the learning management system and this training evaluation form here. This is how we collect our metrics to show the value of offering these free classes to our participants. I love doing these classes. We offer a project management primer, we offer an organizational change management primer, and a business analysis primer. And I love doing these, and I know that they have value, but we have to prove that value to the organization sometimes. So please make sure that you take that evaluation for me so that we can obtain those metrics. And again, that does give you your certificate with that PDU code on it if you are certified. So all you have to do is put in that code and it will automatically generate your PDUs for you. And that is what I have. We got done a little bit early today, which was my goal. Great, because it's a Friday, so maybe you guys can begin your weekend a little bit earlier today, I hope. My contact information is on the slide, and please let me know if you need anything in the future. I am here, Tara's here. We are happy to help or answer any questions. Thank you guys, and have a great day.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.